Hello and welcome to Bad Community Advice. This is the show that's all about terrible tips and toxic takeaways. I'm your host. My name is Seth Ressler. I'm the founder of Community Marketing Revolution. And on this show, I bring on other community professionals to talk to them about the worst advice they've ever gotten. We find out why it doesn't work and what you should actually do instead. I'm really excited about today's episode because we are going to talk about something that is crucial and we haven't talked about it yet on this show. That is onboarding. That is the process of welcoming new community members in and giving them their first taste, showing them what the community is all about and how they should behave in the community, how they should participate. My guest today is a fellow community strategist and the founder of Heather Lynn Angel, LLC. She helps people launch their own communities. Please welcome Heather Angel. Hi, Heather. How are you?
Hey, good. It's so good to be here, Seth.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Look, let's get into right away your bad advice, because your bad advice I think is so important and it's something that we haven't talked about yet. And that is this: we can set up the onboarding after we launch. This sounds like something that I don't know, did this come from a client who was like, we'll worry about that later? Is that where that came from?
Yeah, it's exactly who it came from.
So let's start by talking about what onboarding is, because that's a term that we usually use when we're talking about online communities, but sometimes it's called something different when you're talking about offline communities. And I think often about colleges and universities where they might call it something like orientation, or maybe you'll hear initiation or sometimes just welcoming, something basic like that. But what is onboarding and why is it so important?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Seth, because onboarding carries across all avenues, right? It carries across even new hire orientation, like you were saying, and colleges and that kind of thing. So onboarding is just essentially getting somebody comfortable with their new environment, their community in this case, but just going ahead and getting them comfortable with it. Important to make connections once you're in there. So that's a huge thing that people miss out on if you're not getting the onboarding right, is the sooner you can make the connection with somebody else, the sooner they will interact, they will engage with the community, and the retention is going to go up after that.
Yeah.
So that's
an important point that you bring up, that one of the first things you want to do when you welcome somebody into your community space is you want to connect them to other members of that space. It sounds like right off the bat. Talk a little bit about how you encourage that. How do you make that happen?
Yeah. So really the first thing that I do is I send a DM saying, welcome, with confetti and that kind of thing. And then in that DM, I tell them to do a very specific thing. And that thing is the onboarding challenge. And what that challenge includes is different activities for them to go through the community and to learn the community, but also to engage. So, for example, one of the things is sign up for an event. One of the first things that I want them to do in the community after the onboarding course, or the onboarding challenge, as I call it, is to go to an event. And again, that's because if you're at an event where you can actually see people, talk to people, you're going to inevitably make a connection with somebody, which means you're going to come back and show up time after time. So that's a really important thing in the onboarding challenge. We also have like a couple of different activities for them to do to know their way around the community. So as an example, set your notifications. And that way they're going to different parts of the community so that they learn where everything is, but they're also doing quick activities, which gives a quick win, which helps with that, I did something successful. It's just a very quick win that gives them almost that adrenaline push and that excitement. I oftentimes will gamify the quick win, which means when they're done with that onboarding challenge, they'll get something like a badge, and that signifies that they've done that. It also rewards them for it, and it ultimately helps them to engage with the community at the same time. So there's a lot of different kind of angles going on, and it accomplishes quite a bit.
I recognize that you are talking primarily about digital communities, online communities. And I
Yeah.
imagine that we had talked before we started recording, you're building spaces, for example, in the Heartbeat platform, maybe things like Circle or Mighty Networks. Some people are even using Facebook groups or Slack, tools like that. But there's so much that I think it is helpful when thinking about this to use analogies from the real world. And as you're talking about, hey, we want to show them the space and where different things happen, that's very much like you mentioned when somebody first starts a new job. I always think anytime I've started a new job, the first thing I need to learn is where are the bathrooms?
Yeah, exactly.
Where is the coffee maker? Where do I, who do I go to if I need pencils or whatever, paper, whatever supplies, things like that. I mean, showing people around when somebody comes over to your house, and as a guest at a dinner party, it's like, okay, here's where you hang your coat. If they take off their shoes, here's where you do that, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The other thing that I notice is that you are showing people how to participate. And it's not just about, hey, here are the rules and here's a list of things that you shouldn't do. You're actually showing people what to do. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it's so important to, like, one of my questions in my onboarding questionnaire is what are the things that you can contribute to the community? It's not just all about what do you expect from the community. That's important. We want to make sure that we're giving them what they're looking for. However, we want to also recognize that they have value. And, just through their life experiences, even if they're not an expert in that particular subject that you've got a community on, their life experiences give them value. And so their knowledge is important, their interaction is important. So if you can let them know right off the bat that you're also expecting them to engage, then that becomes such an empowering thing for them. It also makes it a much more dynamic community because you're already setting that expectation.
Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize is that they assume people join a community just for what they can get out of it.
Yeah.
But a lot of people will step up and they're in there because they enjoy exactly what you're talking about, making contributions, and it makes them feel valuable, and really contributes a lot to it.
Yeah, for sure.
So let me ask, when you hear this bad advice, when you've heard this from clients who are like, I'll set up the onboarding later, why? Is it just a matter of time and they want to launch as quickly as possible? What is the reasoning behind that?
Yeah. So I get a couple of different types of clients. Some that are very gun shy. They don't want to launch because they're scared. They're scared of succeeding. They're scared of failing, whatever the case is, right? There's a lot of kind of mindset pieces that we need to work through. However, there are some that are so anxious to get it started that they just want to create the thing and then start inviting people in. And so that onboarding piece just becomes one more thing that they have to do. And until they understand the value in it and all of the things that it actually does for the community and for that member, then, it's a little bit hard, I think, to wrap your head around like, oh my God, I've got to set up one more thing that has all these pieces to it. And think about if they're, not very tech savvy, or if they are a team of one or two and they're trying to set this thing up. This is an extension in most cases of their business, the community piece of it. And so it's a little bit overwhelming for a lot of people. And to have one more list of things that they need to make sure they set up can be overwhelming to address. And so I think the biggest, piece of that I've seen. Um, but definitely something that needs to be addressed.
So let's break it down and make it simple. If somebody is sitting there and they are planning out their onboarding, and they're saying essentially, how do we welcome new members into the community for the first time, and how do we show them how to participate and how to engage? Start with the goals. What do you think are the important goals? What are you trying to accomplish with that onboarding, and how are you measuring that? How do you know if it's working?
Yeah. So the goals, and that's such a huge piece of this, right? And it's thank you for bringing that up because it's not something that you often think about, especially with onboarding. But you need to make sure that the new member is feeling comfortable. You need to make sure that they know their way around so that they don't get into the space and then just feel completely overwhelmed. They also need to make connection, and that is one of the most critical pieces of that. And then it goes into, how it's working is if they drop off after, depending on, like, my community is a quarter at a time, and that's because you need to be in there for a little while to kind of learn some things and pick up the pieces. And I've got a lot of templates and a lot of checklists and courses and that kind of thing. And so you need to be in there for a little while to be able to digest that and not get overwhelmed with feeling like you have to do it in 30 days. And so depending on whether or not you are quarterly, whether you're monthly, that depends on how fast you want them to get through it. But at the end of that time, are you, seeing that there's a drop off? So are they leaving after your 30 days? And if they are, there's something that they're missing. Because if a community is set up properly, and now I say that very loosely because every community is different. Every goal of a community, every vision is completely different. And that's one of the things I love about community. However, they need to understand what it is that they're trying to achieve. And if they're not getting that in that short, kind of that quick win, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's 30 days or 90 days as it is for me, then if they're not getting that, they're not going to see the value in paying time after time. And so if your community is set up to continue to receive value, then they're going to stay. And so the biggest piece of that is retention. That's how you can kind of tell whether or not they are getting that value, whether that onboarding has done its job. The other thing is if they remain completely silent. So there's some cases where people are not, because whether they're shy, they're extremely busy, extreme introverts, I've seen all cases, they're not going to show up all the time. Maybe they live in a different part of the country. Maybe they're in Australia and it's a completely different time zone than we are. And so they can't come because they can't come in the middle of the night or whatever the case is. And so they remain a little bit quieter. Well, that in that case, they are very important to the community. And a lot of people think that because they don't show up or whatever, they must not be getting value. They must not be liking it. And one of the tips that I would kind of say, I'm going off a little bit, but one of the tips I would say for that is to check in every month, check in, maybe more often than that, depending on the member. But check in with each member that you have, or whether you automate that or whether you individually check in with them. The people that you're not seeing as much, just make sure that they're getting value. And so it's that connection piece, which is part of what community is all about anyway. So silence, all of that to say, silence doesn't necessarily mean that there is an issue, because sometimes they are just a silent observer. They're there for the education piece. But the more active they are in the community, the more vocal, the more the rest of your members are going to get value from them as well. And so you don't want this to be a community just about you or just about one person. A community is a whole, is all of us talking to each other. So I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent there. I could talk about
No,
that forever.
but that's great because first of all, I love this idea that it's about retention. That at the end of the day, you want people to, from that first impression, when they enter your space and they enter your community, they feel welcome, they feel a sense of belonging, they know what to do there, they know how to get value out of the community, and they know how to contribute value to the community. And you're going to know if they don't because they're going to stop coming back. Right.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that becomes really important is that, sometimes when we deal with people who are launching a community for the first time, they think it's all about the grand opening and it's all about day one. And we got X number of people through the doors on the first day. And then there's this drop off because they aren't thinking about how do we have to get them back over and over again and retained by continuing to provide value. And I think the other thing that's interesting that you really said there is that, I don't know if you're saying that onboarding is never really done, but certainly that idea that you have to always be checking in and getting that feedback and figuring out, whether people are getting value, you're always working on that retention, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's never ending, and you want to make sure that you're giving the appropriate value to everybody, not just your core group of people.
So let me ask about something that you mentioned there, because you talked about how with your community, you are bringing people in quarterly.
Yes.
And some communities do that. Some people have, like a registration that happens at certain times. And that's when people, again, thinking about a university or a fraternity where, it happens at the beginning of, every fall. And then there are other communities where people can join anytime. I was part of a swim club when I was a kid, and you could join in July or August or February, or it was California. We could do,
Right.
we could do that. So talk to me about the advantages of doing that model that you're talking about, where you have specified periods of time where people can join as opposed to always having the doors open.
Yeah. So there's pros and cons to both. And so for mine, just to kind of clarify that piece, I actually do keep an open model where people can join at any time, but you have to pay for 3 months at a time. So it's still a low price point. It's not, a massive amount of money or a huge investment, but they have to pay 3 months at a time. And the reason is I've actually had people come into my community and they've been very upfront with me. I've got very honest people in my community, which, I think what you see is what you get with me. And so that kind of resonates with my members. But they've told me, hey, I'm coming in, I need the templates, and then I'm leaving. And that's fine. But there's more value there. There's value in the connection piece, and there's value in what they can give my community. And that, so I don't want to set it up as a one and done where you just come in, take, and don't give back. And so I've purposely set it up that way because it does take longer than just a month to go through everything and to get the pieces of community building that you need. And because my community is for community builders, it's everybody in there is building their communities. So there's a lot of things going on and everybody's on a different journey. So that's one of the cons is everybody's on a different journey. And so it would probably be easier for my community if I opened up quarterly and then closed. And maybe eventually I'll do that because then everybody comes in at the same place and then they kind of get to the same place and then they continue on. But right now, it's just completely open and people can join whenever they want. So the benefit of having a closed model, which is you come in, you join at a certain time, so everybody joins at that same, time frame, whether it's a week launch or whatever that is. And then the model close, or then the community closes. And not the community, sorry, the enrollment, it closes. So they're not able to join until the next open enrollment. And there's huge benefit to that. Even though I'm not, using that model, I do know there's huge benefit to that because you can take everybody on a specific journey. It's just not something that I choose to do in mine right now. So there's definitely pros and cons to both sides of that.
Let me ask about another word that I heard you use, which is overwhelm. And I work a lot with content creators, and content creators, their value, they believe is that comes from the content that they create. And so there is this temptation to sort of load up your community, especially if you're doing, a community of practice or one that is focused on teaching or transformation, to just load it up with content and put as much content. And the more content that I can shove into this community, the more value that I am providing. And there is a danger of that overwhelm. And I think one of the mistakes that sometimes, new community builders make is they almost over architect, or they put
Yes.
too much in and it gets too complicated.
Yes.
And you get in. And so what is your advice with that? How can you avoid overwhelm?
Please don't put too much in your community when you're first starting. That's my best advice. um, it is so easy, like you said, Seth, to just want to create so much immense value for everybody that you start your community with all of this stuff. I hear it over and over and over again. Well, I just have to put more content in and then I'll be ready to open. And that never ends, right? There's always more content to build, more content to create, and things that you think your members are going to need. But this is the important piece. Community is very fluid. It's ever changing. And so, again, another thing I love about community, because I love change. So for me, for someone like me, that's very exciting. But for a lot of people, that gets overwhelming, where, okay, it's going to change. So how do I know? Like, you kind of overthink the whole thing. And what you should do is, and this sounds very, very simple. In my community, we keep everything simple. And that's kind of the theme, is just simplify. If you have to think more than a day about it, then kind of back up. And, it shouldn't take you forever to create a piece and start. The other piece of that, though, is because it's fluid, because community is ever changing, and because your members need something at different stages, that thing that you've spent so much time creating may not be the piece that that particular group of people needs right now. And so you need to be able to kind of create on the fly. And that is a little bit controversial for the people that are, my type A people that are really planners. And I get that. So I say that cautiously. I know that's not a possibility for everybody, but if you can create for very, short time periods, and focus on that, ask your members what they need. So do a survey. Maybe it's every quarter. You're kind of doing this survey to interact with your members, find out what it is that they're liking, what they're getting, and what they need. And you're going to find a lot of answers in that. The other thing is, listen in your meetings. So I have a weekly Q&A, and in that weekly Q&A, there was one time, I believe it was about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 now, that they were riffing off each other, all my members, and there were just ideas were popping like crazy. And so I wrote all of those down, and I heard several times in that conversation, ooh, we should do this, or we need to talk about this more. And guess what? That becomes now content for the next, just from that one meeting. I think I got content for the next 2 months. And it was things that they specifically said they needed. So listen. A lot of listening in your community, a lot of watching, a lot of just kind of behind the scenes, just being observant and caring.
Something that I've noticed as a content creator, I mean, because that's where I've spent most of my life and my career, you have control over it until the moment you hit publish and it goes out into the world. And that's when you release control of it. Whether you're a podcaster, whether you're a filmmaker, whether you write a blog, whatever. And community is not like that at all. And so it's kind of a mindset shift. And it's exactly the thing that you're talking about, because you're really co-creating that space with your members so that you can meet their needs. And so you need those feedback loops that you're talking about, those surveys, that listening that happens in those groups so that you can figure out. And it's a tough thing to do because, I am one of those type A people. I like that control.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be fluid and be on the fly and go, oh, we need to shift and do this. So I think what we're saying here is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That there's
You
a
couldn't
lot
have
of
said it better.
experimentation. Yeah.
Yes.
No, for sure. I want to go back to the onboarding campaign and talk about the tools you're using, because you mentioned DMs. What other tools do you think about when it comes to creating that actual onboarding campaign? We know what we need to do with it now. We know that we're measuring it in terms of retention and participation. Do you like to use emails? Do you like to use DMs? Are you using just the tools that are within the online platform that you built the community in? Or are you having Zoom calls with new members? Like, what do you like to do there?
Yeah, the great question. So there's as much as you can keep it in the community. So depending on the platform that you're building on, that's more possible with some platforms than it is the other. And that may be one of the things you think about when you're choosing a platform, but that's another conversation. But some of the tools that I do like to use, or the things that I like to include in that onboarding, is the DM. So I prefer, and I use Heartbeat, and I know Circle does the same. I believe Mighty Networks does the same. But you can automate a DM so that when somebody joins the community, it sends them a welcome. In Heartbeat, you can throw up confetti, and it's just kind of a fun, they get that as soon as they finish their questionnaire and profile picture and a little bit about them, that kind of thing. The other thing that I like to do personally, and I've gotten really great response from this, is to send them a quick video. So I record it on Loom typically just because it's quick and easy and I can just include the link. And I put that on their profile, not on their actual profile, but where they introduce themselves in the community. I will read that and then I relate something to it. So in the DM or in the video, I might, hey, welcome. Super excited to hear that you are, taking this journey. Let us know how we can, how we can help. But at the same time, I also relate to something that they've written about in their bio to let them know that this is not a generic message. This is actually me picking up my phone, recording a Loom, and welcoming you because I truly value you. So that's something that if you're able to do that, if your community is not thousands of people, and you have a smaller pocket of people joining at a time, then if you can do that, do that. And that's a very less than 1 minute video. It should not be long. The other thing that I do in my questions that I ask for them to fill out when they join the community is, and this is not a form to get them to join the community or to approve them. This is after they've joined, they have to ask a certain set of questions. So when I refer to the questions, that's what I'm referring to. And one of the things I ask is, what is your favorite karaoke song or shower song? And the reason I ask that is because I've created a Spotify playlist for them. And so every new member that comes, I add their song to the Spotify playlist, and it becomes an internal playlist just for our community. And it is the most eclectic playlist that you would ever see. And it's so much fun. And people get really excited about that. So that's kind of a fun way that I've incorporated some. It's kind of gamification, but it's a very personal touch to just our community. And so that's like our little secret, our secret sauce that only we share. And then other tools I like to use are email, definitely. If you can create them in the community platform, that's great. I also like to set up an email sequence. I do a very short one. I know of other people that do longer, and that's, however you want to do it is fine. I set one, it's a three email welcome sequence, and it goes every 2 days. And so the first one as soon as they join, and then 2 days later, and then 2 days after that. And it's a list of certain things that you should include in your email to not only welcome them, but let them know, like, make sure you do this. And have you signed up for an event yet? Make sure you sign up for an event, and just kind of reiterating what that onboarding challenge did. You're reiterating those pieces, but a few things at a time. You're also mentioning, like, you might throw in your welcome video in there. And that, again, that should be like a 60-second video, less than 2 minutes for sure. But you can throw that into the first one. You can do several different things. But this email sequence, the reason why I like to have it off of the platform is because they may not be used to checking that platform yet. And so now they're getting a separate email, which we're all used to checking. They've got a button to connect them back to the community. And so it's giving them something fun. I make them very fun. And so it's giving them something fun to read, setting the tone for the community, while also giving them a button to connect back to the community so that they don't forget to log in. Or in some cases, I mean, how many times have we signed up for something and then didn't save the link and we can't find it because we didn't get an email saying, hey, so glad you joined. Here's a link to, whatever it is. And so that's kind of my way of double verifying that they're able to get into the community, but also reinforcing, I want you in the community. So click the button, come back. Click the button, come back.
Right. Build that habit. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So you've offered a lot of great insights, and so I want to pull them out because, again, this onboarding piece is so important. And like you said, the goal here is to make sure that people feel welcome, they feel like they belong, and that they know how to participate in the community right from the bat. And you're going to know whether that's working or not because you can look at retention. You can look at whether they come back enough. Some of the things that I thought that you said that were really interesting is one of the first things you want to do is connect them to other people. And you're using events to do that, that you really want to try and get them to an event right off the bat. It sounds like even more than connect them with content, you want to get them connected to other people. Yes. And some of the mistakes here that people make is just overwhelming them with too much stuff. So this is really great. I really appreciate it. Are there any other mistakes that people make with onboarding that they should watch out for?
Really, I could talk about onboarding literally all day long. So this is probably a loaded question. Keep it simple. You don't have to complicate it. People say, oh, I've got to do this onboarding thing. And again, with the overwhelm for the creator, it doesn't need to be complicated. Start with something simple. Start with a few of the things that I suggest, and then build it as you go, as you can. Do not let onboarding be what holds you up from launching, but do not launch without onboarding. And I have seen that. I don't believe I said this before, but I have seen that with that client that told me they weren't going to do the onboarding and their community closed within 6 months because they didn't have any connection going on with those people. So it's really, really critical.
All right, Heather, here's the last question. I ask everybody this. Make a prediction. what do you think we're going to be talking about in the community space, say 5 years from now?
This is hard. It's hard to predict 5 years because of how rapidly technology and even community is changing. However, I think we're going to go through a period where people think they can run their communities on AI. And I actually had somebody say that to me. I'm going to build a community and then just let AI run it. And that's not truly community in my viewpoint. I didn't work with them. I wasn't the right fit. Uh, so I think that there's going to be a period of time where AI, where people just think, oh, you know, we can do this automated. And oh, I don't. It's not going to stick.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to come back to a time where community, not just online, but also in person, becomes so important and such an important piece of our business that we kind of get back to the basics. And I hope that's happened sooner than 5 years from now. But I do expect that we're going to acknowledge that within that 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, community run by AI sounds like the Matrix to me. It just,
Oh my gosh. Red color.
not that there aren't features of running a community that I think AI couldn't be helpful with.
Yeah.
I think flagging, offensive content or things like that, AI could be hugely helpful. But, like you said, that video introduction where you're reacting to a person that you do and you try very much to make it personal, you can't do that with AI, So,
No.
all right, Heather, thank you so much for joining me. So if people want to know more about you, the website is heatherlynnangel.com. And you have something you said for people who watch this or listen to this.
I do. I have a complete onboarding playbook. I do typically charge for this. I am not for your community. So I appreciate what you're doing, Seth, and bringing all of our community people together and, people that want to learn about community. And what you're doing is simply amazing. So if I can offer this, that would be amazing. It's heatherlynnangel.com/Seth. And
right.
You can get the onboarding playbook.
Well, thank you so much. That's fantastic. And I'm glad you're doing this because all I'm doing is giving people bad advice. So it's nice that you actually have a playbook full of good advice to give to people. I appreciate that. Well, Heather, thank you so much for joining me. This was great to talk about onboarding.
It was so fun. I really appreciate you, Seth, and everything you're doing.
Uh-oh.